Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Ikvot HaTorah, in the foots of the Torah. We are continuing in our study in the Parashah 2. We left off talking about Tamim and how one is perfect, and we were talking about grace and the name of Noach. And how that relates to our parasha, and how it's going to relate further down when we start talking about getting into the Haftarah. So there's a couple of things that I want to address here in Bereshit 9 before we move forward, and it's in verse 8. And it says, "And Yahweh spoke unto Noach and to his sons and with him, saying, And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you." I think it's vitally important that we understand the covenants that Yahweh made throughout history, okay, and who He made the covenant with, who are the people that the covenant was made with, okay, and what the covenant spells out. The covenant that Yahweh is speaking about here was made not just with Noah, but with his seed, Shem, Ham, and Yapet. So what we find that this covenant and that He makes with them, it helps us to understand that his seed had an understanding of Yahweh also, and they had what is called a halakha, which we talked about in the last study, that the halakha, they had a walk in a way with Yahweh also. So it wasn't just Noah and his walk that was with Yahweh, but the children had a walk. Now, whether they accept the covenant or not, that's going to be something that we'll probably see in the future studies here. Okay. And the other thing is, we find that the covenant that was made is perpetual. It's forever and ever. Leolam va'ed, forever and ever. And so we find that Yahweh keeps going back to the covenant, and he goes back to whom He made the covenant with, and He will call on us and tell us that I made the covenant with your forefathers in the day, okay, in the day of. So I think that's vitally important that we understand who the covenants are with and how long they are, okay. We want to look at now going into Yeshayahu 54 verse 1, and it says, "Sing, O barren, thou that didst bear, break forth into singing, and cry aloud." In other words, publish the news, the basar, the gospel. This is the gospel. We're going to see a shadow of the gospel as we look through the scriptures. It says that thou didst not travail with child, for more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, says Yahweh. So we have to identify, I always like to say, who, what, when, where, why, and how. So we always have to identify the verse or the scripture, okay? So we have to identify, one, who is the barren woman, all right? We have to identify who was put to shame in her youth, and also we have to identify who was the married wife. So in studying scripture, interpret scripture, and that's why I always like to take time and take you into the various scriptures so that you can see how Yahweh walks through the scriptures and is showing us the pictures and the types and the shadows, also through parables, that so we can understand the scriptures a little bit better. It says, "Sing, O barren," and it's talking about Ephraim, Israel, the northern 10 tribes. Okay, thou didst not break, that does not bear, break forth into singing and cry aloud. In other words, publish what is being done. Publish the good news. Publish, yes, the punishments, but also publish the fact that we're going to be delivered. There's going to be safety. There's going to be salvation and healing. Our wounds are going to be bound up, and Yahweh is going to break forth. Okay? And it says, for more are the children of the desolate, Ephraim and Israel, that would be them, than the children of the married woman, which is Yehudah. That's the two southern tribes. Okay? So I want to try to get into Yehezkel, Ezekiel. And again, I want to I want to take my time in getting into these scriptures. I don't want to feel rushed, so we can get a good understanding. Yehezkel goes into great detail of the events. We want to go to Yehezkel, Ezekiel 16. He goes into great detail in the events that would occur throughout the history of Israel. So I want to be very clear that the scripture is not speaking to the nations. The scripture is speaking specifically and concisely to Israel. Yahweh is not speaking to the nations. He's speaking to Israel in regards to his relationship that he has with them, and what was taking place in this relationship. So I just want to make sure that we understand how these things are taking place. So for greater clarity, I divided Yehezkel 16 up in 4 sections. So verses 4 through 8 is one section, and verses 9 through 14 is another section, and 15 through 34, and then 35 through 42. Hopefully this will be helpful in clarifying the prophet's messages that he is sending forth to Israel. So let's look at verse 1 in Yehezkel, Ezekiel chapter 16. Again, the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying. Now this term word is addressed extensively in the Parashah 1. So I'm going to refer you to Parashah 1 for that term, so you get a better understanding, very in-depth understanding of what that term word is. I know just really quick in Yochanan 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word was with Yahweh, and the Word was Yahweh. Okay, faith cometh by hearing, emunah cometh by hearing the word of Yahweh. Okay, so those are little tidbits so that you can wet your whistle a little bit to help you understand. So again, I want to refer you to the Parashah 1 to get a better in-depth study of the term word. He says, Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations. Now, the word went to Israel and told Israel of their abomination. So Yehezkel is shown here by the word, the abominations that was happening with Israel and what was going on. And he's going to give it to us in this parable. So he says, and say thus, saith Yahweh, your power unto Jerusalem. Thy birth and thy nativity is in the land of Canaan. Now let's look at this term birth real quick. It says Israel's new beginning is in the land of Canaan, and is foretold to Abraham. When Yahweh appeared to Abraham, when Abraham had prepared to sacrifice and had cut it in half and split it open, and Yahweh had appeared to Abraham, and in that vision Yahweh goes into great detail about what's going to happen to his people, and the covenant that was a covenant agreement, a covenant that was perpetual with Israel. And it says that in Abraham, descendants would go down to Egypt, and that Yahweh would redeem them In other words, the 12 children of Yaakov would go down into Egypt. Okay, so when it says that the children of Israel, Israel's name was changed from Yaakov, from Jacob to Israel. So it was the 12 children of Jacob that went down into Israel. Okay, and Yahweh says, and with an outstretched arm and by the merits of Abraham, that Yahweh will expel the Amorite from before the 12 sons of Yaakov and destroy the Hittites. Okay, so just in a little nutshell, you know, you got a little brief of what's going to be happening in this study. Now, the term birth, because it says that in the day of thy birth, in thy nativity. Now you think birth and nativity, you know, it's the same thing, but in understanding the term, the origin of birth, I have the pictograph here for the letter Kaf, which is the palm of a man's hand. That's what that means. Okay, and it also is a resh, and this is a resh, and that is the head of man. Again, forgive my my crude drawing, but that's the best I could do. Okay, and you combine those two together, and it means the palm of man, and it gives us a concept of a hollowed out or a digging out with a tool, and the term is kur. Okay, and it means to dig or tunnel out. Okay, so look, it means to dig or to tunnel out. So hence the place from which you were brought forth was dug out. Okay, and we find this again, we see this picture in this idiom in Yeshayahu, Isaiah 51:1, where it says, hearken to me, ye that follow after righteousness, ye that seek Yahweh, look unto the rock whence you are hewed, and to the hole of the pit whence you are digged. So it talks about a beginning, where you are beginning, where you're coming from. And so when Israel came out of Mizraim, Egypt, they traveled in the wilderness for 40 years, and they were taken into a land, into the promised land. They were taken into the land of milk and honey. Okay, that's our time for today. Shalom Aleichem. Peace unto you. See you next time.